Lion is bitten by snake and protected by his cubs. His reaction will give you goosebumps. The sunrise painted the vast plains of Kruger National Park golden when Mufasa, a majestic lion with a golden mane, awoke with the characteristic roar that announced the beginning of a new day. At 8 years old, he was the undisputed king of his territory, respected by all creatures that inhabited those wild lands. His imposing 200-kilogram figure rose with the dignity of one who had earned every battle, every territory, every moment of respect through his own strength. 3 small cubs played around his paws, biting his tail with that innocence that only the young possess. Casey, the most adventurous female of the group, was barely 4 months old and already showed the courage of her lineage. Alongside her, her brothers Tao and Django completed the litter that filled the great feline's heart with pride. His companion, Nala, rested under the shade of an acacia tree, tenderly watching how the king of the jungle became the most patient father in the world. The morning progressed with the usual routine of the savannah. Mufasa had marked his territory at dawn, patrolling the boundaries he defended fiercely. The heat was beginning to intensify, and the family was heading toward the river to drink fresh water. The cubs ran ahead, playing among themselves, while the parents followed them with calm but alert steps. Among the thorny bushes that bordered the path to the river, a black shadow slipped silently. The black mamba, almost 3 meters long, had been disturbed from its morning rest by the noise of the leonine family. Nervous and feeling its territory threatened, the serpent rose with lightning speed, displaying the whitish interior of its mouth in a lethal warning. Mufasa, focused on watching his cubs, didn't perceive the reptile's presence until it was too late. The mamba attacked with deadly precision, sinking its fangs into the lion's hind leg. The neurotoxic venom injected directly into his bloodstream, initiating a countdown that would change the entire family's destiny. The great feline roared in surprise and pain, instinctively turning to face his attacker. But the serpent had already disappeared into the undergrowth, leaving only the trail of its lethal venom coursing through the Savannah King's veins. Mufasa immediately felt a strange sensation in his paw, as if thousands of ants were walking under his skin, but initially didn't understand the gravity of the situation. The cubs, frightened by their father's roar, ran toward him with eyes full of concern. Nala quickly approached, sniffing the wound and immediately perceiving that something terrible had occurred. Her maternal instinct activated to the maximum, and she began licking the wound, trying to help her companion. During the first 20 minutes, Mufasa tried to continue normally. He walked toward the river, though with a slightly slower pace. He drank water abundantly, as if his body intuitively knew it needed hydration. But the black mamba's venom was already doing its silent and lethal work. The first evident sign came half an hour after the attack. Mufasa tried to jump over a low rock, a movement that would have been trivial for him under normal circumstances, but his hind legs didn't respond as expected. He staggered slightly, regained his balance, but an expression of confusion crossed his leonine face. The neurotoxic venom directly attacked his nervous system, interfering with impulse transmission between his brain and muscles. What began as slight weakness in his hind legs gradually spread throughout his body. His breathing became more labored, and each movement required conscious effort that had previously been automatic. Cassie, with the particular intuition of cubs, was the first to notice something was wrong with her father. She approached him and began rubbing against his paws, emitting small whimpers of concern. Tao and Django soon joined their sister, forming a protective circle around the lion, who had always been their unshakable fortress. Mufasa tried to calm his cubs with a soft roar, but even that sound came out broken and weak. The progressive paralysis advanced inexorably, and the proud king of the savannah began to understand he was facing a battle he couldn't win with strength and courage alone. When he finally collapsed, unable to maintain his body weight on his trembling paws, panic seized the small family. Nala roared desperately, calling to her companion, licking his face, trying to wake him from what seemed like a nightmare. The cubs didn't understand what was happening, but they knew their protector, their hero, was in grave danger. It was then that the most primitive survival instincts activated in the small felines. Despite being barely 4 months old, Kessie, Tao, and Django formed a defensive circle around their fallen father. Their small roars, which under normal circumstances would have been adorable, now resonated with an iron determination that defied their short age. The first to test this new dynamic was a group of spotted hyenas that, attracted by the scent of the weakened lion, cautiously approached from the east. The hyenas, known for their opportunism, had detected Mufasa's vulnerability and saw the perfect opportunity to eliminate a territorial competitor. Kessie was the first to react. Despite her small size, she planted herself firmly between the hyenas and her father, bristling her juvenile fur and emitting the fiercest roar her small lungs could produce. Her brothers positioned themselves on each side, forming a living barrier of pure courage. The hyenas, initially surprised by the cubs' determination, tried to surround the position. But Nala, galvanized by her cubs' example of bravery, joined the defense with a ferocity she had rarely shown. Her roars resonated throughout the savannah, warning any predator that they would have to pass over her dead body before touching her family. The confrontation lasted almost an hour. The hyenas, despite their numerical superiority, didn't expect to find such organized and desperate resistance. Every time they tried to approach, the cubs closed ranks, growling and showing their small teeth with courage that belied their age. Nala, for her part, moved like a fury, charging at any hyena that dared approach too closely. Finally, the hyenas retreated, deciding the reward wasn't worth the risk. But the leonine family knew it wouldn't be the last challenge. The scent of weakness spread through the air, and other predators wouldn't take long to arrive. Mufasa, lying on the ground, watched with a mixture of pride and desperation as his cubs risked their lives to protect him. His breathing had become increasingly difficult, and paralysis had reached his chest. He knew his hours were numbered, but the love he felt for his family gave him the necessary strength to keep fighting. The second challenge came with sunset. A solitary buffalo, old and bad-tempered, approached the leonine territory. Normally, Mufasa would have been more than capable of intimidating the bovine with his mere presence. But in his current state, the buffalo represented a mortal threat to the entire family. Kessie, who had naturally assumed leadership of the defense, studied the buffalo with eyes that seemed too wise for her age. She instinctively understood that this enemy was different, bigger, stronger, and potentially more dangerous than the hyenas. But her determination didn't waver for a moment. The buffalo, with its threatening horns and body mass of more than 700 kilograms, approached slowly, evaluating the situation. It could sense the lion's weakness, but also perceived the family's protective fierceness. Its small eyes gleamed with a mixture of curiosity and aggression. It was Tao who took the initiative this time. Despite being the smallest of the litter, he launched himself toward the buffalo's legs with courage that left even his own family breathless. The bovine, surprised by the cub's audacity, instinctively retreated, giving Django time to join the attack. The two small lions worked as a team, distracting the buffalo, while Kessie and Nala positioned themselves strategically. It was a dangerous dance, where a single error could prove fatal for any of the cubs. But their coordination was perfect, as if they had been practicing their entire lives for this moment. The buffalo, frustrated by the unexpected resistance, charged directly toward Mufasa, but Kessie interposed herself in its path, roaring with such ferocity that the bovine stopped short. In that moment, something magical occurred. The small lioness's roar resonated with such authority that for an instant the buffalo saw in her not a defenseless cub, but the future queen of the savannah. The confrontation extended well into the night. The cubs took turns resting, but never left their father unguarded. Nala coordinated the movements, using her experience to position each cub in the most effective place. It was a demonstration of family love that transcended the barriers of the animal kingdom. Finally, the buffalo retreated, not from fear, but from respect. It had recognized something in that small family that moved it deeply. The courage and loyalty it had witnessed were values it itself appreciated, and it decided it wouldn't be the one to end something so beautiful. The third threat came with dawn of the second day. A small group of young elephants, playful and inexperienced, approached the leonine territory during their morning frolics. Normally, lions and elephants maintain a respectful distance, but these young pachyderms didn't fully understand the rules of the savannah. Kessie, exhausted by 2 days of constant vigilance, felt her strength failing. But seeing the elephants approaching her defenseless father, she found energy reserves she didn't know she possessed. Her brothers, equally exhausted, positioned themselves at her flanks without hesitation. The elephants, with their curious trunks, tried to investigate the fallen lion. They had no malicious intentions, but their simple body weight could accidentally crush Mufasa. Kessie realized that this time she couldn't intimidate the intruders. She needed a different strategy. With wisdom that defied her age, Kessie began communicating with the elephants using body language she had learned by watching her father. She slowly approached the youngest elephant, maintaining eye contact, showing respect but also firmness. Her message was clear: "I recognize your strength, but this is my territory and my family." The young elephant, intrigued by the small lioness, extended its trunk toward her. Kessie didn't retreat, allowing the trunk to touch her gently. In that moment of contact, something extraordinary passed between the two species. The elephant understood the desperation and love that motivated the small lioness. Slowly, the group of elephants retreated, but not before the group's leader, a young male, performed a gesture that would remain engraved in Kessie's memory forever. He approached Mufasa and, with infinite delicacy, touched the fallen lion with the tip of his trunk, as if it were a blessing or recognition of respect between kings. As the elephants walked away, Kessie collapsed next to her father, finally overcome by exhaustion. She had fought for almost 48 hours without rest, keeping at bay all the predators that had tried to take advantage of her family's vulnerability. Her brothers curled up next to her, and Nala covered them with her body, creating a shelter of warmth and protection. Mufasa, watching his cubs sleep, felt a mixture of pride and sadness that threatened to break his heart. He knew his children had grown years in just 2 days, forced to become protectors when they should have been protected. But he also knew he had witnessed something extraordinary, the birth of true leaders. The third day brought unexpected hope. Dr. Michael Harrison, a South African veterinarian who had dedicated his life to wildlife conservation, was driving his all-terrain vehicle through the park's paths as part of his morning rounds. He had been working in Kruger for more than 15 years and knew every corner of the territory like the back of his hand. His assistant, Sarah Molefe, a local biologist who had grown up near the park, was the first to notice something unusual. "Doctor, look at 2 o'clock, she said, pointing toward a group of trees. "There are lions there, but something isn't right." Harrison stopped the vehicle and took his binoculars. What he saw left him speechless. A family of lions was gathered in what appeared to be a defensive formation, but something in their posture suggested they were protecting something or someone. He decided to approach cautiously. As they got closer, the image became clearer. A male lion lay motionless on the ground, while a female and 3 cubs maintained a protective vigil around him. Sarah, with her local experience, immediately recognized the signs. "It's poisoning," she murmured. "Probably a snake." Kessie was the first to notice the approaching vehicle. After 3 days of constant fighting, her instinct was to distrust any potential threat. She rose on her trembling paws, preparing for another battle she knew could be the last. But Harrison, with decades of experience working with wild animals, immediately recognized the situation. He moved carefully, maintaining distance but showing through his body language that he posed no threat. Sarah prepared the medical equipment while the doctor evaluated the situation. "It's a black mamba," Harrison said, after observing Mufasa's symptoms. "Look at the progressive paralysis, the breathing difficulty. We need to act fast." The challenge was clear: how to treat a 200-kilogram lion being fiercely protected by his family. Any direct approach could result in an attack from Nala or even the cubs, who had proven willing to fight to the death. Harrison made a decision that defied all standard protocols. He got out of the vehicle, leaving all tranquilizer weapons behind, and slowly approached the leonine family with empty hands. Sarah followed him, carrying only the medical case. Casey, exhausted but still determined, planted herself between the humans and her father. But something in Harrison's posture, in the calm of his movements, in the absence of threat in his eyes, made her hesitate. For 3 days, she had learned to read intentions in other animals' eyes, and these humans radiated something she hadn't felt before: hope. Harrison stopped 5 meters away and sat on the ground, making himself smaller, less threatening. He began speaking in a low voice. It didn't matter that the lions didn't understand his words, but that they perceived the intention behind them. "I know you've been fighting," he said softly. "I know you're tired, but I'm here to help. I'm not going to hurt your family." Sarah, following her mentor's example, also sat down. Slowly, she began taking small medical instruments from the case, showing them to the lions as if they were peace offerings: the syringe with the antidote, the stethoscope, the bandages. Nala was the first to respond. After 3 days of constant tension, something in these humans' presence calmed her. She slowly approached Harrison, sniffing the air, evaluating the threat. When she was close enough, the veterinarian extended his hand, allowing the lioness to smell it. The moment of contact was electric. Nala, with her maternal instinct sharpened by the crisis, seemed to understand that these humans offered the salvation she had been waiting for. She retreated slowly, but not defensively, but permissively. Kessie observed the exchange with eyes that had matured prematurely. For 3 days, she had been her family's protector, the barrier between life and death. Now, for the first time, she perceived the possibility that someone else could help. Her small paws trembled, not from fear, but from relief she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Harrison slowly approached Mufasa, talking constantly in a low voice. "We're going to take care of you, great king," he murmured. "Your family has been incredibly brave." The initial examination confirmed his suspicions. Mufasa was in critical condition, but there was still time. The black mamba's bite had injected a significant amount of venom, but the lion's large size had slowed its effect. He had a very small window of opportunity. Sarah prepared the injection while Harrison monitored vital signs. The antidote for black mamba venom was extremely potent, but also dangerous if administered incorrectly. Too little, and the venom would continue its lethal work. Too much, and the antidote itself could kill the patient. The cubs watched with fascination as the humans worked on their father. Casey, who had assumed leadership during the crisis, approached Harrison and, in a gesture the veterinarian would remember for the rest of his life, rubbed her small head against the man's hand. It was a gesture of trust, gratitude, recognition that she had found allies in her struggle. The antidote injection was a moment of extreme tension. Harrison knew the next few minutes would determine whether Mufasa would live or die. The medication had to counteract the neurotoxic venom, restore nervous system function, and allow the lion to regain the ability to breathe normally. During the first 10 minutes, there were no visible changes. Mufasa remained motionless, his breathing labored, his eyes glassy. The cubs approached their father, as if wanting to transmit their vital force to him. Nala gently licked her companion's face, whispering encouraging roars. Then, gradually, signs of improvement began to appear. Mufasa's breathing became more regular. His eyes, which had been opaque and dull, began to show flashes of consciousness. He tried to move a paw, and though the movement was weak, it was a voluntary movement. Harrison and Sarah exchanged looks of cautious hope. The antidote was working, but recovery would be slow and require intensive care. They decided to establish a temporary camp near the Leonine family, monitoring Mufasa's progress and ensuring there were no complications. During the following days, an extraordinary routine was established. Harrison and Sarah took turns caring for Mufasa, administering medications, monitoring his vital signs, and providing intravenous fluids. Meanwhile, the cubs seemed to understand that the humans were allies and gradually began interacting with them. Kesey, in particular, developed a special connection with Sarah. The biologist, who had grown up near the park, had an intuitive understanding of animal behavior that fascinated the young lioness. They spent hours observing each other, learning, communicating without words. Tao and Django, for their part, were attracted to Harrison's medical equipment. The veterinarian, amused by their curiosity, allowed them to smell the carefully disinfected instruments and observe while he worked. It was as if the cubs were learning veterinary medicine by osmosis. Nala, initially the most cautious, gradually began trusting the humans. Her maternal instinct told her that these strangers not only posed no threat, but were the key to her companion's salvation. She began allowing Harrison to approach Mufasa without interposition, and even helped by keeping the cubs away during the more delicate medical procedures. The turning point came on the 5th day after treatment. Mufasa, who had been lying motionless for a week, managed to lift his head and look around with eyes that shone with renewed intelligence. His first impulse was to look for his cubs, and when he saw them safe and sound, he emitted a weak but unmistakable roar of relief. Kesey was the first to respond, running toward her father and rubbing against his face with joy that melted everyone's hearts. Tao and Django immediately joined in, and soon the entire family was gathered in a group embrace that would have been impossible to imagine a week before. Harrison observed the scene with tears in his eyes. In his 15 years of work in the park, he had seen many things, but had never witnessed such a pure and powerful demonstration of family love. These cubs had risked their lives to protect their father, and now their sacrifice had been rewarded. Mufasa's recovery was gradual but steady. Each day he recovered a little more strength, a little more mobility. The cubs, who had matured prematurely during the crisis, gradually began behaving like cubs again, playing and exploring under their parents' watchful gaze. Sarah documented the entire process, creating a photographic and video record that would eventually become powerful testimony about the importance of conservation and responsible human intervention. The images of Kesey protecting her father, of the cubs forming a barrier against predators, of the family reunited after recovery, would become iconic in the conservation community. 2 weeks after the initial treatment, Mufasa was strong enough to walk short distances. Harrison and Sarah knew it was time to allow the family to return to their normal life, but the separation would be difficult for everyone involved. On the day of farewell, Kesey approached Harrison and Sarah with a solemnity that seemed inappropriate for a cub her age. She rubbed against each of them, as if thanking them not only for saving her father, but for teaching her that not all of life's challenges had to be faced alone. Mufasa, now able to walk though still weak, slowly approached the humans who had saved his life. In a gesture that none of those present would ever forget, the great lion bowed his majestic head before Harrison, a recognition from king to king, from warrior to warrior. Sarah, with her deep understanding of animal behavior, interpreted the gesture correctly. "He's thanking us," she murmured, "but he's also releasing us from our responsibility. He's telling us he can take care of his family again." The leonine family slowly walked away, but not before Mufasa stopped one last time and looked back. His eyes, which a week before had been glassy from venom, now shone with renewed life and deep gratitude. He roared once, a sound that resonated throughout the savannah, announcing that the king had returned. Harrison and Sarah remained silent for a long time after the family disappeared from their sight. They had witnessed something extraordinary: the power of family love, the strength of survival instinct, and the possibility that different species could work together to create miracles. Months later, during their regular rounds, Harrison and Sarah occasionally encountered the leonine family. Mufasa had completely recovered his strength and had resumed his role as undisputed king of the territory. The cubs had grown, but Kessie, in particular, had developed a presence and confidence that distinguished her even among her brothers. The experience had changed everyone involved. The cubs had learned lessons about courage, loyalty, and survival that would normally have taken years to assimilate. Mufasa had developed a deeper understanding of his family's unconditional love. Nala had discovered reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. And Harrison and Sarah had been reminded of why they had chosen to dedicate their lives to conservation. It wasn't just to protect species or ecosystems, but to preserve these moments of deep connection, these living testimonies to the power of love and determination. The story of Mufasa and his family spread throughout the conservation community, inspiring a new generation of veterinarians and biologists. It became a symbol of hope, demonstrating that even in the most desperate circumstances, love and determination could create miracles. Years later, when Kessie became the matriarch of her own family, she often brought her cubs to the place where her father had been attacked by the black mamba. There, in that place that had witnessed so much pain and so much love, she would tell them the story of how family love had triumphed over death itself. The savannah continued with its eternal cycle of life and death, predators and prey, seasons that came and went. But somewhere, among the acacias and serpentine rivers, lived the memory of a family that had demonstrated that true love can conquer any venom, any threat, any desperation. And on silent nights, when the wind whispered through the tall grass, the animals of the savannah could still hear the echo of that roar of gratitude that Mufasa had emitted the day he recovered his family. It was the roar of a king who had learned that true strength doesn't come from being the strongest or the fiercest, but from being loved unconditionally and loving in the same way. Control is due Chat Sonnet 4.